Hey guys, in this new tutorial we're going to be covering car paint shading. And so I see a lot of people struggling, especially in the Facebook group, and a lot of new users struggle with making a car paint shader. And I think one of the main reasons a lot of people are struggling with the car paint shader is that they use the default built-in car paint shader. So if we, let's just jump into matte context here and just go into our shader ball. And so if we type in car paint, you'll get the Redshift car paint. And so most people just go to this, and this is really old. This is like, I'm going to say Redshift 1.0 days, maybe even older. It's old. It's been around since before 2014 at least. And so since the early days of Redshift. And at the time, Redshift was modeled closer to Mental Ray and V-Ray in terms of shaders. And so a lot of people come from V-Ray and Mental Ray biased engines, and they assume that Redshift's shader system is the same. So you have a dedicated car paint shader and a dedicated nodes, a dedicated skin shader, stuff like that. But that's not how Redshift works. Redshift might be like V-Ray in our render options, in our settings, but our shading systems are a lot closer to RenderMan, IRS, and Arnold in terms of just one node does everything. And if you guys have seen my other tutorials, you'll know by now that when I mean one node does everything, I'm referring to the RS material. And so the RS material, that's the one node does it all. Just do that. You know, use that node for everything basically, because it has the most options. It gives you the most control. It's the newest, and it's the best when it comes to just about everything. And so the only other node I ever use really is the incandescent node, and technically the RS material can do the same thing, but I just use the incandescent node every once in a while, just for specific things. And but besides that, RS material should be your go-to node. And so, like I said, a lot of people struggle because they use the old car paint shader, and it's just old. So what we're going to do is basically replicate what the car paint shader does with the RS material, and better, you know. And so the only problem that Redshift really has right now is we have no way to generate car paint flakes. So Arnold has a utility similar to how we have the curvature, noise, and all these systems here, these utility kind of nodes that generate stuff. Arnold also has a flakes utility. And so right now this is a pretty highly requested feature, so I'm hoping now that custom AOVs and stuff are finished and all these major big tech changes are done with the Redshift core, we're going to start to get these smaller utility nodes going again, just like we got curvature and triplanar and stuff like that in the past this year, or the last year actually. And so I'm hoping this year we'll get some more utility nodes like that. And so since we can't do that, I'll actually provide you guys with two flake maps that I have that I baked out that are randomized, and they'll tile just fine. And so we're going to use that. And technically, I suppose you could build a VOP-COP system and try to simulate the flakes, but it's just way more work. I'd rather just use these two texture maps that I have already built that are set up just for this anyways, and you guys could have it and you know, do your own thing with it. And so anyways, let's delete this. Let's just get started here. So we've got our classic shading scene, and see, like I mentioned to you guys, I always use this. Once you have this, a setup scene like this, it's the way to go. You pretty much just open up a scene, save it out as a new name. So right now I've got this named Look Dev Car Paint Shader, and so now we've got the car paint shader set up. scene, and all we got to do is let's use the IPR ROP. Make sure we've got that, and let's just keep it on camera move. And so let's actually throw on a LUT for our purposes. Let's see. Assets. And you guys should have already gotten all the LUT pack stuff. It's in the look dev scene. So if I end up making more and updating them, I'll add to them, and I'll let everybody know. I actually just recently bought a GH5 camera, and so I need to set up some LUTs for the camera, and eventually I'm going to be filming some vlog plates of just some stuff, and we're actually going to eventually lead to that, to integrating some of our renders into actual plates, and you guys will get all those files once I get around to that. But for now, let's just stick to the Cine style. I like this LUT. It looks good. Let's drop that down to 70. And if you're wondering how I'm moving this around, middle mouse. It took me a while to figure this out, but you can middle mouse scroll this, middle mouse the LUTs. You can middle mouse the exposure, all that stuff. So that's pretty useful. So you don't have to like click and drag it around. Let's increase the fixed scaling. Let's just do 175. And okay, cool. So we've got our render going, and let's actually get a little closer here. Oops, it's not locked into the IPR cam. So let's get in here. And so right now we've got our just our default, generic scene that we start every time with. And so let's get rid of this. So we're gonna delete that, and we'll keep the color, because this is what's going to control our base paint color. So we'll keep this, and what we're going to mostly work on basically is this RS material and the parameters inside. So let's actually move to a more interesting paint color. And like I said, eventually you'll be able to customize it your own way. I might actually expose these parameters so that you could actually tweak it at this level, which would be kind of cool. So you could just change color, Fresnel, stuff like that. And but we'll get to that in a bit. And so let's I don't know, let's do like something kind of cool, like this like deep purpley kind of color, deep blue purple. And technically it won't matter right now if we're using the 454 gamma, just because we're not using we don't need a specific color. We're going to just be playing around with all the hues and stuff just to tweak stuff. But let's stick with this. And okay, cool. Let's make a weight. Let's get a weight of 8 for the diffuse weight. Roughness, it might be a little too high. Let's try 0.5. Let's just half that. We don't need backlight. Translucency, reflection. This is important. We do basically how most car paint works is it's 3 layers. Well, 4 technically, but we're not going to worry about the base metal layer. So there's 4 layers. There's the base metal, which we would just say is the base paint. I mean, technically it would be 5, I guess, if you include primer and stuff like that. But like I said, this is CG. We don't need to. We're not actually building the car and stuff. So the only layers we really got to worry about is the paint, which is the color, the flakes, which are in between the paint layer and a clear coat layer. And the flakes are what gives you little changes in specularity and stuff. And so those are the three most important aspects we got to worry about. So right now we've got our color layer. This is going to handle the base paint layer for everything. And there we go. So we got to just, this is all we're worrying about for the base. So now we need to turn on a clear coat for our second layer. And so how it works is typically car paint, the base layer is a little rougher. So right now we've got a roughness of 0.7. We can change this later to our liking. But typically this is the rougher layer. And the coating layer, which is up here, is the really high intensity sharp specular. It's not perfect, but you know, it's up there. So right now it's actually on. So if we were to turn it off, it's like this. We got a pretty matte, flat object. So that might be too flat for our base. So let's drop this down to 0.5. Oh, oops. Let's delete that. Let's go to 0.5. Let's try 0.3. This might be a little too glossy, but let's work with that. And let's actually make this lighter. Desaturate it. Okay, so something like that. That's cool. And we might actually need another light in here just to break things up. Let's actually rotate up a little like this. Okay, cool. So this is our base layer. Right now it's more like a plastic or something. And so now we got to come back in, turn on our coating. And so typically a full weight of 1 for our specular coating weight. And a roughness, you want the coating to actually be pretty sharp, like the specular. So 0.1 or less might actually be good, because you want the strong highlights, but you also want a gradation underneath the paint, so that you get like this gradient. And you'll see why this is important once we use the Fresnel node, because the Fresnel node's kind of like the key to making this effect work on top of the flakes. And so we'll just keep the roughness, well, let's do 0.05, so it's really pretty sharp specular. And for our IOR, we'll stick to GGX just because GGX is better looking. And our IOR should be different actually. What's the 1.4? Let's do an IOR of 1.5, and our coating we'll do 1.55. So now it's a little sharper. You can see the coating specular going on right here and stuff. And let's make this 100%. And so, okay, cool. So now we've got a little nicer, more of like a painted clear coat look, but we still don't have the car paint look. And so this is where most people kind of just say, okay, they give up or whatever. And so the magic starts to happen when you use the Fresnel node. So if you hit tab, start typing Fresnel, you'll get the RS Fresnel. And so what the Fresnel node lets you do is it lets you control the facing and the edge angle relative to the camera, what gets output. So if I were to just plug this into surface, for example, you'll see this. And so right now our perpendicular color is this white, and our facing color is black. And so this is actually the node you need to use for velvet and a bunch of other materials. It's really important. So the idea here is most car paint actually don't have a white edge on the perpendicular, they actually are black edged. A lot of car paint materials are like this, and the facing color is actually what is shifting. And so right now it's due to the IOR and the curve fall off. Right now we're using curve fall off, IOR. So if I uncheck this, we could use the curve fall off, which is not IOR based. This is just kind of like you tweak it yourself kind of thing. So if I had to do 0, 2 or something, you'll get this. And so this is more artist friendly. You could just adjust it to your liking. And if you use IOR, then it's literally about the IOR. And then you have the extinction coefficient. So if we move this around, and some of this might be familiar to you from the iridescent tutorial we covered. So if we do this, you'll notice this going on. And so it's relative to the angle that we're viewing at. So anyways, what we need basically is we're going to use this to power the color of our specular. So if we go back to our regular shader and we pop open our base properties, or you could just try to wire it in like that, and we'll just go through the list. The inside of here, there's reflection color. And so what reflection color lets us do is the roughness at the base of the material dictates how rough or smooth things are. But the reflection color tints the specularity. So what we're going to do is now if we increase, instead of this being white, if we use like, I don't know, maybe a cool color for this, I guess a hot pink or something. And you might be wondering, well, it's not really doing much. You kind of see something going on here. But the problem is that you need an intense color. So you need something like, I don't know, a value of like 3 sometimes. Saturation of 3. So it's beyond the 0 to 1. We're breaking the 0 to 1 scaling. And so now we start to tweak around this number a pinch. And so you know, you could do it through the IOR. Personally, in my opinion, just easier to just do this by hand. So we're going to just try a 1. And so as you can see, using the without the IOR and just doing a curve fall off, this is more artist friendly in my opinion. It's technically not physically accurate, I guess, but because IOR is, but whatever, right? We're trying to just go for something that looks good. Let's actually drop down our IOR on our base purpley material, and so it's 1.4, and let's actually make it a little rougher. Let's try 0.5. Yeah, it might be a little too rough. Let's try 0.4. And so, as you can see, with a curve fall off of 1, and our shader intensities have to be beyond 1. So if I were to just like bring this back to regular world values, this is what you'll get. And I mean, you could see it. You know, it's not like invisible or whatever, right? Like you could see this fall off of color. But sometimes if you really need to, some colors, like if I wanted to tint this a different shade, they won't show up that strong. So you need to just, and it's funny because I originally said never go over 1, but this is one of those situations where, you know, sometimes you got to bend the rules. And so the idea here is what's going on now is in car paint materials, you actually get a gradient from the specular that is facing you. of sometimes hue shifting. Not all car shaders are, not all car paints are like this. This is more like one of those weird exotic, like sports car kind of paints. And so you can, shift this into a different hue. For example, like instead of that purple, maybe you want to go with this lighter blue, right? And so again, like I said, you could go break these values and go beyond and really, really push the specular fall off in gradient if you want, And so now we're kind of getting closer to like a cool car paint. We've got this dark edging, which is caused by our black perpendicular. Then we've got our base blue color, which is created by bluish purple, which is created by this. And then we've got our specular areas having a fall off gradient of our facing color, which is this color. And so, okay, cool. Now, so far, all right, it's and it's also kind of rough. So we're getting this smooth fall off. Let's actually go. Let's try 0.5, just so we get a smoother fall off transition here. And so then our clear coat is actually what's giving us these sharper specular. So if we even go, well, let's leave it here, because now the next key ingredient to add is we need flakes. And so the flakes is what will break up this color. Some car paints, they actually don't have flakes or certain materials, so you might not need them, but for the sake of completion, we're actually going to add the car paint flakes. So let's slide this over. Let's actually hit Shift S and use the curved lines. I just prefer, they look better in my opinion for organization purposes. And so okay, cool. Next step is, let's zoom out a little. Our next step is to bring in the normal maps that we need. And so if I open them up real quick, just so you can kind of see what is in it. They're EXRs. So let's open this up in Photoshop real quick. Give that a second to fire up. Let's actually pause this. And use EXR.io. Open that up. And for some reason, oh yeah, got to move this out of the way because it's always on top. So if we zoom in here, we'll notice that this is basically the map that we're going to use. And all it is just some pattern, a repeating pattern at different heights of the normal map. So some are higher, some are lower. The angle's a little different. And so, and it's just a repeating pattern. And so I have two of these, one with a lot of little flakes and another one that's got a little more larger. And so the problem, like I said, in Photoshop is we don't have not Photoshop, Redshift, is we currently don't have a utility node that can do this. Like I said, I'm sure there's a way you can build it with VopCops and get crazy with it, but I already have these tiling textures that I made, so you guys could just use that. And so the idea is that we'll now just bring those in. So let's actually hit Tab, start typing in texture, RS texture, and type in bump, because we're going to use the RS bump map, which does normal maps now. So up here we're going to switch it to, I believe it's tangent space, but actually it might be object space. I will know right now once I do a test render. So let's input that. And since this time we don't want it to affect the whole object, we want it to only affect the base paint layer, not the coating layer. We're actually, instead of plugging it in up here for the entire object, we're going to go into overall, and there's a bump input here. And coating also has its own bump input right here. So if you wanted to go a step further and add little scratches and stuff to the coating layer, we could do that. As a matter of fact, I think we'll do that just for fun. And actually, between these two, I need to add a triplanar. And the reason we want a triplanar is because we want to just keep this procedural. And a triplanar will let us project it in all the axes and tweak the scaling and the blending and all that stuff. So actually, let's plug that in here. And we'll just keep it same image because we just want the same normal map. And so let's plug that back in. Actually, I think let's reverse this. So let's do this. And so now, okay, cool. Let's zoom out a little. And then in here, we need to, oh, where'd that menu go? We have our paint flakes. Let's disable that. We're going to use paint flakes 001. You could use, like I said, the pattern's a little different. You can open them up yourselves, and you guys could, choose which one fits your situation. And so, since it's an EXR, we need to gamma override. Make sure it's at gamma 1. And also because it's a normal input, we need that on. And in advanced, let's actually change the MIP bias -2. Just that way the MIP mapping isn't too aggressive. And our scale is probably going to be huge, so we should probably drop this down to, actually let's try 0.5. And like I said, I don't know if this is tangent or object. We're going to find out, and our scale might be way too high, but we're going to find out. So let's hit render. Wait a second. And see what happens. Okay, so we got it. We've got it in there from the looks of it. It just seems like it's a little too strong. So let's drop down our height maybe to well, actually, it might just be that this is off. So let's try object space. Okay, this, I think it's well, I don't know. We see it in here. Let's drop down to 0.5. I think this is right. Yeah, no, it's object space, so let's keep it in object space. And as you can see, now we've got the flakes. You can see them down here, up here. So let's just select this region, and just holding shift and clicking and dragging, that's how you get that. And let's try 0.1. Okay, that might be a little too weak. Let's try 0.2. And so you can see in here the flakes that are basically shifting the specular. That actually might be way too big. They're too big. So let's now head back to our triplanar. Let's reduce the scale to 0.3. Let's see what happens. 0.2. Actually, I think that's making them bigger. Wrong way. So let's go to 0.6, 7. 0.7 might be good. Let's check out other areas. Let's look down here. And so what you're getting is you're breaking up the paint. So it's giving you these little flakes basically between the specular, the clear coat, and the base paint. So this actually, let's try a full bucket render. So let's click that. Let's just see what we get. Yeah, this looks good. And so the flakes might be a little too big still. So let's actually just increase the scale to, let's try 0.9. You don't want it to be too, I mean, this will obviously, this parameter is going to depend on what you're putting it on. Your car might be, you know, to scale or whatever, and so this will depend how big you want your little flakes in the scene. And obviously your Fresnel fall off will also depend on your scene. But for our particular shader ball right now, this works fine. And so, cool. Yeah, this looks good. And so now we've got this basic setup. If we were to let's go back to progressive. If we were to just rotate the light around, yeah, I mean it's working. Yeah, this looks cool. So let's fire off a bucket render. Let's actually save this. And so neat. Now we've got this gradient going on from our purple to our blue to a brighter faded specular blue, our sharp clear coat, and now we've got little flakes breaking up the paint beneath. And now, obviously, like I said, if you wanted to go even further, we could always add some scratches or something. So let's actually do that right now, just for fun. So we'll duplicate this, and we'll use height field because this is going to be a height field based texture, since it's not a normal map. So we'll click that. Let's move that out of the way. And we got our scratches that will then go into coding, and under coding bump, we'll turn that on. So right now it's way too strong. But so let's actually reduce the strength to quite a lot. Let's try 0.3. That's still way too strong. So let's try 0.005. And that still might be too strong. So let's try 0.002. We just want it to be subtle. Okay, this is looking a little better. And let's actually increase the render scale. So let's try 250. So we can really come in here and see the effect. We've got some scratches here and there. It almost looks like we're getting fireflies, so that might be a problem. Let's decrease the scale even more. Make this even weaker. So I just want it to be a subtle thing, just to break up the, there we go. This looks better. So now if we rotate the lighting around, we've just got a little bit of roughness and stuff going on, just to break things up a bit. I mean, if you are trying to do like a showroom car, you're obviously not going to do this. This is just if you want like that subtle wear and tear on your objects. This is still too strong, so we're going to go even lower. Let's try 0.002. This might be too low now, so let's try 8. 0.001. Yeah, this is cool. So you've got these little subtle imperfections and stuff. Okay, neat. And so to really see how the specular influence is going on, and keep in mind this isn't a neutral HDR. This isn't even like a fancy HDR or anything. So, but if it's looking good here, then we got a pretty good idea that it's going to look pretty good in a different lighting. And just for our purposes, I think let's uncheck that. We're going to drop let's drop an area light right here, just so we could just get a good intense real light here instead of just being an HDR. So let's control click that. Right now it's going to be really blown out. And go into the shader. Let's switch over to area. Let's actually move back to progressive mode. And we'll just move the light so we get the specular right where we want it. Like right around there. And let's just move around. Check to see where it's at. It's way up here. Let's increase our scale a little bit. Our intensity might be a little too high, but let's switch to temperature first. So it's a little cool temp right now. And let's just drop the intensity to 50. So yeah, this is already looking pretty good. And so the cool thing about Houdini actually is you could actually save this out. Like I mentioned in the other tutorials, you could turn this into a digital asset, and you could name this, you know, car paint shader or whatever. And so what's cool is we'll actually make a null. Yeah, let's do that. So we'll actually make a null here. You could do it, I guess, at the top and add parameters here, but I just don't like to clutter the OpenGL stuff, since that helps for OpenGL. And we'll just call this controls. And we'll just make this black. And so here we'll open this up, edit the parameters. Let's pause this, move it out of the way. I mean, we're satisfied, right? And so let's make some controls here. So let's what we need is color input, and we need a float and another color input, and we'll need another float just to tweak the scale and strength. So okay, so let's add 2 colors. We'll call this, and let's just hit apply. And let's actually get rid of this input operators. Well, no, we'll deal with that later. Okay, let's just stick to, okay, so base paint, and we'll just call this base paint. We'll hit apply. Then for our second one, we'll call this for now, no. Let's just call it specular color. Specular color. We'll apply that, and so now we've got something. We'll have the base paint color, which is up here, and we'll have our Fresnel color that we'll control. And now let's just make another float, and these 2 floats, one will control our curve fall off, so Fresnel fall off. They'll fall off. And this will control, actually we should just call this facing color. Fresnel facing color. Apply. And this next parameter will control our flake size. So we'll call this flake size. And we'll apply that. And we'll lock the 0 because we don't want it to go into negative numbers. I think we could deal with the Fresnel fall off being negative, because that'll just let you tweak the way the fall off is reversed. So that could be useful. And I guess I could do one for the top layer, but I mean, you guys could manually figure that out, you know, and add that stuff yourself. And so, okay, cool. So now we've got this control parameter here. And so what we could do is copy this. So we'll copy this reference, copy parameter, and we'll just come in here and drop it as a relative reference. And we'll do the same with this, copy parameter, paste relative reference, copy parameter, paste relative reference, copy parameter, and actually this shouldn't be oops, this should be actually a vector. So let's edit parameters. Let's turn this to a vector, float vector 3. There we go. And so now let's copy this and drop that into here. Paste relative reference. So, okay, cool. So now we've got this control node set up. And let's just put that back at 1. Let's put this back at, I think we had it at 0.9. And our facing color, we could start messing with these two. So now if we just start this up again, we're gonna obviously get this white. And so what's cool is now we've got basically a little rig to change car paint shading, so we don't have to, you know, deal with any of this stuff anymore. Obviously, if you want to add scratches to the outside, you're gonna have to, it's probably best to manually do this. And so, but now we've got this little rig where we could just do whatever we want. So let's go with some dark green. Bada bing, bada boom. We've got this dark green going. Cool. And let's try something like yellow. And we'll break the limit. So we'll go 3 value, 3 saturation. And just like that, now we've got this really cool, nice looking green metallic car paint shader, you know. And so then you manually have all the options to change the flake size, the curve fall off. This is what I love about Houdini. It's like, as an old Maya user, it's like stuff like this, like where I can just make my own controls. It's like, wow, that's awesome. I love that about Houdini. And so now I could just move this stuff out. Let's just move that here. Move that here. Move this here. And we could just drop down some backdrops. We just call this coding bump. Drop another backdrop down. And oops, for some reason it broke that. Or actually, no, that wasn't coding bump. That was bump bump. Let's actually it's the flakes. So car paint flakes. And we could just change this color to blue. Then we'll drop this in here. And we'll call this coding scratches know why it's dropping it over there. Let's okay, there we go. And this is our base, or just our paint, really. Yeah, our base paint. And we'll just change the color for this to green. So now we've got our car paint, RS material, base. Just to say paint, car paint base. We've got our controls. And just like that, we've got a nice little organized scene. We'll move this over if we want. And now we've got everything set up, ready to go. And like I mentioned, in the future, if you guys need to use this for other scenes and stuff, you could always have the option now to save this out as a Houdini, what's it called, an HDA, and a Houdini digital asset. And this is your car paint rig, you know, so we could rename this to just car paint base, and now it's good to go. So we could save this, and like I said, obviously if you guys wanted to add the parameters here so you never even have to dive in here, you could do that. And so instead of having your controls here, they'll be out there. I like to keep things organized and dive in here. And yeah, so just like that, now we could do other stuff, you know, like let's make a red kind of a car paint. And you know, just like that. I mean, it's so easy. So now you have all the car paint colors you want, you know, and now that you've set this up yourself, you don't even have to worry about, you know, any colors. You could probably, you know, once you save it as a HDA, you could just type in Houdini or red shift car paint and it'll pop up. And actually, one of the neat things is the documentation mentions to make custom digital assets that are redshift shaders, you just have to put redshift in the front of the name, so that way it automatically knows to organize it that way. And so yeah, that just about covers everything you guys need to know about car paint shading. It gives you all the basic info you need to get, you know, some cool flakes, some little bit of scratches and stuff, how to get exotic fading colors. And if you guys really want to go crazy, you guys could add the iridescent setup that I built for you guys in one of the last tutorials, and you could input that into this and add that to your coding color. Right now the coding's white, since it's just a pure white specular. But if you guys wanted to have iridescence on the outside of this, just plug it into here. So you could just literally copy paste, or if you saved it as a digital asset, copy paste the inside, paste it in here, and plug it into here. And just like that, you'll have iridescent effects on top of all this. So that's one of the neat things about Houdini and Redshift. You could just start building up your asset library and your shaders, and you could just drag and drop them in the future. And so yeah, cool. I'm gonna probably just save this out and knock out a final render real quick. So let's actually go to our render cam, and actually let's just stick to IPR cam, and we'll go to out. Well, actually no, what we could do is just in our render ROP, we'll just switch the cameras. So it'll have all the nice render settings, but instead of the render cam, we're going to just use our IPR cam for our purposes. And let me check if, I'm not sure if this has the bokeh on. So if the bokeh is on, let me see. Let's move this over here. Where's the camera? Render IPR cam. Yeah, the IPR cam doesn't have that on. So let's actually do that. Let's enable depth of field, and we'll use a custom bokeh. And I actually have it included for you guys, so it's bokeh shape, this one right here. Let's accept that, and let's move out of IPR cam. And so we've got the IPR cam, and to control the depth of field, you can actually right click the camera gizmo thing, and there's a couple options here. What you want is the focus handle, so you hit that, and you see this little red box. This is the focus point, so we can move it up here, and then these control how out of focus everything, like the focus area, the focus zone, basically. And so while you're doing that, if I move to the side, you'll notice in view, the focal length and aperture settings, or actually no, not view, sampling. Here we go. The f-stop will actually change. And so let's move around and get it to focus in on our actual shader ball. So it'll keep everything else out of focus, and we could, you know, tweak that ourselves later. So let's actually just let's do an IPR, a progressive IPR right now. And we'll just drop down the fixed scaling just for speed purposes, so we don't have to waste a lot of time waiting for it to render. And right now, you'll notice it's dark. And so the reason it's dark is because right now the bokeh image normalization isn't being influenced. So the bokeh shape, if it's got any black or anything like that in it, it will actually influence the light that's coming in. So you could actually change this to unit intensity or white color sum. So white color sum does that, and unit intensity uses the image. White color sum basically gets rid of it all. So there's not really any color influence. There is the chromatic aberration, stuff like that still goes through, but what it does is it gets rid of any black influence. So personally, I just used white color sum because I don't want it to affect the shades and stuff. And so now, cool, we've got our render, and as you can see, it's a little sharper here, and it's out of focus down here. And so we can adjust that, either increasing the power. Let's increase the power to 5, and you'll notice now it's a little stronger out of focus, and also by adjusting this here. So if I were to pull this in like a lot, notice how the background now is a lot not in focus as much, while this is super in focus. And that's because our little red box that's the focal point. So that might actually be pretty good. Well, no, let's defocus it just a tad. So this looks cool. Okay. Let's go with 300%, and let's do a final bucket render and let it just do its thing. And so this is a high quality render because we're using the actually we're not using pause that. Let's go to select our ROP. We're going to use the render ROP, and now we're using the render ROP, which is also using our IPR camera. So if we check in here, we attached the IPR cam earlier. So now you can check out the diffuse. Looks cool. We have no SSS, no refraction. Reflection looks clean. Specular looks clean. And obviously that's because we're using the render ROP, which is the high quality settings. So I mean, if we come in here, yeah, we've got a little bit of noise in the bokeh. But, you know, this is like a huge, I think this is like 3K render or something. For the internet, we're going to zoom out. You won't notice that noise. If you need something cleaner, crank up the samples, you know. And I'm sure you guys have all seen my unified sampling tutorial video. And so, cool. Now we've got this nice big render. And you've got some subtle noise, some scratching up of stuff. You've got the flakes to break up the shape. We've got this hot specular gradient going from our clear coat specular to our diffuse Fresnel specular we had beneath. And we've got some nice depth of field. Cool. So there you go, guys. That's pretty much it. That's how you guys can produce some cool car paint shaders and, you know, get some great results right out of the box. Like I said, you guys could start knocking stuff out, switch over to any color you want. Like I showed you, now that we've got our little control rig, just, you know, switch it up. Alright guys, well, thanks again for supporting my Patreon. Hopefully you guys will find this useful. You guys will get all the files and stuff, so you guys can come in and check this out yourself. And, you know, if you need to build your own with more parameters, if you feel like you need more parameters. And I'll be including the render and all the assets basically for this shot. And yeah, that said, thanks again. Hopefully you guys make some cool car paint shader stuff. Have a good one, guys.